Today we're talking about Stanley Marcus and the luxury chain Neiman Marcus. Yes, I met Stanley Marcus with great intention because in 1990 I was hired as the director of credit for Neiman Marcus Stores corporate office in Dallas, Texas. We were located on the 27th floor of a high-rise there named Renaissance Tower, and it was maybe 5 blocks or so away from what we refer to as the downtown store, Store 1, or the original Neiman Marcus store. And let me tell you something, I was fascinated with the history of Neiman Marcus. From the old-time stories, Stanley Marcus wrote a book called Minding the Store, and in the thumbnail you see a picture of me. He's standing over his shoulder, he's signing a copy of that book, Minding the Store, and it was about his experience as one of the co-founders of Neiman Marcus and the story of how it became. And it was, everything about it fascinated me, from the tales of great wealth and elegance to the famous his and her gifts, the outlandishly expensive his and her gifts like his and her ships or his and her airplanes. They would come up with a his and her extravagant gift in their world famous Christmas catalog. And in my office on the 27th floor, over the years I was there, I spread out on a table was every Christmas catalog from every year I was there. And it was, I got to tell you, it was one of the more exciting places that I've worked. And there were a number of interesting things that happened, as you can well imagine. My job was to run the department that managed the Neiman Marcus credit card. And the Neiman Marcus credit card was around long before like MasterCard and Visa and bank cards, what you're familiar with. It was a very early store charge card. And let me tell you, there were a lot of very famous names carrying around the Neiman Marcus credit card. And while the bulk of my job was certainly to manage the people and the systems around the hundreds of thousands of credit card holders, I was also responsible for taking care of the credit needs of our top customers and the customers that needed very personal attention. And my favorite one by far was Elton John. Now, I wish I could say Elton and I hung out and talked about his credit card, but of course that never happened. I never met Elton John. But at the time I did meet his business manager in Los Angeles, and that's my contact person for managing his personal credit card affairs. And certainly I won't talk about any details about those. That's his private business. But he and his team were kind enough that each time that Elton John came to the Dallas-Fort Worth area for a concert, they gave me backstage passes. And while I did not meet Elton John, he certainly walked within feet of me more than once, and I was usually given a couple of seats in the front row. And long before my Neiman Marcus day, I was a huge Elton John fan, and I just love going to those concerts. So that was a lot of fun. There were others. I got a very angry addressed to me personal letter from Roseanne Barr, and the letter was because the manager of our Beverly Hills store called up and said, I want you to send a VIP credit card to me, or to Roseanne, And I can't remember how it was delivered, whether he gave me an address or whatever, but I immediately had a special card embossed, and I coded it so, it was exempted from credit limits and reporting to the credit bureaus and things of that nature. And about a week later, I got a letter addressed to me, and I opened it up, and it was that card cut into tiny little pieces in a very, very angry, and rightfully so, an angry letter for her informing me she had never asked for this, and that it was not legal to open a credit account for someone without them signing a contract or agreeing to it, and she couldn't have been more correct. Fortunately, we had not reported the fact to the credit reporting agencies, so I think legally we were safe. And if I'm betraying Neiman Marcus here, it was so long. This is like the early 90s. Statute of limitations long past, and I'm the one that made the decision to do it. So whatever. Anyway, it was interesting. I got a letter from a celebrity. Of course, it was really angry, and I wish I could remember what she said. It wasn't like filthy or anything, but you could tell she was really angry. I cannot remember exactly what the letter said, but I got a letter from Suzanne Summers, and I just loved that. I actually lived in Santa Monica for a while in the 80s, not long after Three's Company, and there are probably younger people going, what? Who is Suzanne Summers, and what has that got to do with living in LA in the 1980s? Well, Suzanne Summers was in this show with John Ritter called Three's Company, and it was in, I think, the late 70s and early 80s. This character lived with two gorgeous women in an apartment in Santa Monica, and Suzanne Summers was one of the actresses, and she was just a stunningly gorgeous, voluptuous, funny blonde actress, and it was, I can't remember what the content of the letter was, but it certainly was. It wasn't an angry one. I hadn't done something to make her angry, but I got a letter from her that was pretty exciting. One of the things that I got to do was visit stores. It was important to maintain good relationships with the stores, so I traveled quite a bit, and we had stores all over the country. Another point, what happened was our parent company also owned Bergdorf Goodman, which is in Manhattan, and we consolidated the credit operations and took over their credit operations and did it from Dallas. And there was a big concern on the part of Bergdorf Goodman not to have their credit people on site as they're used to. They're very particular about their clientele. I would say that Bergdorf Goodman was an even higher level clientele than Neiman Marcus was. So what I had to do is at least once a month I had to make a trip to New York and check on things, make sure everything was going fine, and be seen by the management people at Bergdorf Goodman. Well, Bergdorf Goodman is right in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, and it's right on Fifth Avenue. There were two stores. There was a men's store, and the main Bergdorf Goodman store were the corporate offices for Bergdorf Goodman. And I'm going to have to edit this out because I'm having a senior moment trying to remember the name of the hotel that I stayed in. And I can't think of it right now. But anyway, it was at the time, a well-known hotel on Central Park South, an older hotel. And it was, it was a luxurious hotel. But of course, I got a regular single room. And a regular single room on Central Park South in kind of a regular hotel the room itself was unimpressive, right? It was very, very small. I don't recall having any kind of, it's not like I had a view of Central Park.
but the company was paying for it. The thing that was very popular back then that the company endorsed was, if you, on your business trip, if you were willing to stay over a Saturday, they would pay for the hotel because they would save so much money on the return flight. So I would maybe come to New York on a Wednesday, work Thursday and Friday, and I would have the whole weekend to myself, and the hotel would be paid, of course, and it was a liberal expense, business expense, travel expense, where I could literally really eat anywhere I wanted to eat, and there was no maximum. You can eat in a fancy restaurant, and funny, I did eat in a couple fancy restaurants, but not usually. It's not my thing. And I gotta tell you, the place that I ate the most at is pretty funny. If you go out the back door of this hotel, not the Central Park South Side, but there was, whatever the parallel street is there was a bodega right behind it that had what they called like a hot table. They had hot foods that I think it was by the pound, and I would load up these hot foods, and I think there were maybe $3 or $4 is what I was paying for a meal. And granted, I could have gone to any restaurant I wanted, or I could have just ordered room service in the nice hotel I was in. But I just loved this food. It was kind of crazy, but I just loved how much I liked that inexpensive food in that bodega. Another memory I had, I think it was an auditor from, I think it was one of what they called back then the Big 8 auditing firms, and we were working on a project together in New York, and she invited me out to dinner, and it was a very trendy restaurant, and I looked at the table next to us, and there was Mariel Hemingway right next to us. And you see famous people on TV and whatnot, and oh yeah, they're beautiful, but sometimes you see them in person and you're just, wow, what, it's almost artistic how beautiful her, and that I was struck by her. And it wasn't in the days where you could maybe try to capture a picture on your cell phone without getting caught. It was the early 90s. We didn't have cameras on our cell phones. I do remember going to a payphone and calling a friend of mine back in Dallas and going, "You'll never guess where I am and who I'm looking at right now." I forgot who I called. I called somebody, probably my friend David. But that was the other memory that I have about New York City is this. There was, for a time, they wanted me in a different hotel. There was a new hotel they had to deal with, and it wasn't on Central Park. But on the walk between the hotel to Bergdorf Goodman, I went by the Today Show, the studios. And they were just starting to have the portions of the Today Show outside. So I had this routine where I would walk to the office and I would buy a cup of coffee and a bagel, and I would attend the outdoor Today Show. And if you think about it, when you see it today, it's this huge crowd every day, people line up signs. But back then, it wasn't popular. People didn't know about it. And I can recall a day where there were 3 or 4 of us out there, and the only person I remember, I think I remember Al, but definitely I remember Brian Gumbel. I remember him sort of between takes, sort of flipping his microphone up in the air or something like that. But my face was on the Today Show many times because they would do parts where they put the camera in the audience, and when the audience was me and 3 other people, my face got on TV a lot. But I was pretty fascinated by that, and I was delighted over the years where that got more and more popular and bigger and bigger. But that was a fond memory. So, but hotels, it was the Essex House. It was the Essex House. It's the one on Central Park South where I spent the majority of the time. That small stint in this other hotel, I can't remember the name of it. I didn't like it very much. It was fancier and bigger, but it wasn't on Central Park. So I had a serious girlfriend back then, and I flew her and her 9-year-old son to New York for a weekend to spend with me. And when I checked into the hotel that week, I said, I had warned her. I said, look, it's going to be a really small room. I'm sure they can get a cot for your son. New York will be wonderful, but the room's going to be, it's a little small room and it might be not comfortable. She didn't care. So I go to check in and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, on Friday, if you could put a little cot in the room. My girlfriend's coming with her son and she's going to be there Friday and Saturday night. And they said, well, could you wait? And I'm like, okay. She said, if you could just have a seat, sir. She directs me to the lobby, and I sit down, and I can't imagine why I'm waiting. I mean, it was a pretty simple request. Maybe they had to get approval for a cot. Who knows? I waited for, I think it was about 20 minutes, and finally I get up, and they're checking me in, and they're giving me the key, and I said, are we all set for the cot on Friday? And she said, you're totally taken care of, sir. Don't worry a moment about it. I said, okay. So I went up to the room, and I opened the room, and I walk in, and the first thing I see is a giant living room with a dining room table that seats probably 12, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. And I walk a little bit further in, and there's like a living room pit that, you could have a big party in. They had given me, for the same price, an enormous suite for the whole week. It was pretty luxurious. Her son was 9 years old, and it was not long after Home Alone and Home Alone Lost in New York had come out, and so there were a couple things that we did with him. We took him to the plaza, to the lobby where they shot the scene, a couple scenes with him in the lobby, and then I had him. There was something in the movie where he ordered room service and said something funny. There was some catchphrase, I forgot what it was, but we let him do the room service order, and he said whatever catchphrase that was. It made him pretty happy. But that made for a wonderful weekend in New York. The other thing I remember about Neiman Marcus is I mentioned that I was on a building called the Renaissance Tower, and it was on South Elm Street in downtown Dallas, and it happened to be very, very close, within a couple of blocks of the site of the Kennedy assassination. And in the years I was there, they did the Oliver Stone movie, and it was surreal, where they had all the era cars, and they were shooting on the street there, and people dressed in period pieces. It was an eerie thing to have that around for a while. Eerie and interesting. What else? I was there from 1990 to almost 2000. So I was there at Neiman Marcus for about 10 years. And, I do remember lots and lots of these trips because every major city has a Neiman Marcus store. And they were also opening stores fairly regularly in the 90s. And one of my duties was to go to the store opening, and the way we supported the store opening was we gave training to the people. There's a credit office in each store. And also, we would solicit the Neiman Marcus charge card during the store opening. And we would hire what we called a hostess company, where these very well-dressed women would approach customers, give them credit applications, answer the questions, and so it was the same group of women that would travel and meet me at each store opening, and we would work together. And I may or may not have fallen a little bit in love with the woman that owned the company. Yeah, she was a delightful woman. I miss her. But we really had a lot of fun. That reminds me of a story. And we had a new store opening outside Detroit. And one of the things they would always do is they came with a core group of hostesses, and then they would hire a few locals. And it was a real tradition that we would all work really hard, and then after the store closed, we would all go out to eat or to party. I was a young man. I was partying. It was 1990. I was 30 years old. And in Detroit, one of the local girls, it was her birthday, and she invited us all to her birthday party. And it was at a bar, and she gave us directions, and we all piled in this, I think we had a van or something. We piled in this van, and we're following the directions. And we pull up to this bar. The parking lot is packed with cars. It looks very upscale, very fancy looking place. And I walk in, me and 7 women. And what becomes relevant here is the color of my skin and the color of the skin of the women with me. We were all white, and every single person in this bar was black. And we were noticeable. And we certainly got a lot of attention. And I'm not going to tell you silence fell over this big bar, but there was definitely a shift in the atmosphere as we moved in, and I was like, oh, okay, is this okay? Is this gonna be okay? And it was one of the first times in my life I felt like I was in a position where I was a obvious minority, and that was a new experience for my privileged white male status. And we hear sort of a scream, and the girl whose birthday it was runs up to us, obviously glad that we're here, obviously invited us, and sort of things go quickly and subtly totally back to normal. And we met her friends, and we drank, and I danced with all the girls all night and had a blast. And the only unusual thing that happened, I was in the men's room, and this guy walks up to me and says, "I gotta hand it to you, my friend, you got balls." And I don't know why he said that, because certainly there was not a hint of hostility towards me from anyone in that bar at any point, but it certainly was a very unique, eye-opening experience. And it was a lot of fun. I kind of miss those days. that's pretty much, that's the Neiman Marcus story. And I see we're coming up on about 30 minutes. I don't want to go too long with it, but here and there, I think at the end here I'll throw up a couple of pictures. I'll throw up this first one is going to be of me and Stanley Marcus, and this one was recently sent to me by one of the ladies in this picture. She had this old picture and she sent it to me or posted it on Facebook, and it was really nice to see her face and to see the face of people. Both these ladies I work with, and I really liked both of them a lot. They were great co-workers. But that was me and a couple of my co-workers on the 27th floor at, I think it was 1201 Elm Street in downtown Dallas, Renaissance Tower. If you ever see a picture of the Dallas skyline, it's this high rise that, if you look, kind of has an X on each side and sort of towers on the top. You can't miss it. It's pretty unique. But anyway, I hope it's not too distracting to listen to me while I'm driving. But I'm getting this dental work done. I have to keep making these trips down to Mexico from Quartzsite down Arizona Highway 95, and it's a straight shot, and there's hardly any traffic, as you can see, and it's a convenient place to drive and talk. And I'm kind of comfortable doing that. Take care, everybody, and if you haven't subscribed, subscribe, and I swear I'll find my way with this channel. I know I've got these talk and drive things, I've got RV things, I've got mental health things. I'm just trying to find what's going to work for me here. So it could take a while, but in the meantime, I'm going to be throwing the content out there. I hope everybody is having a fun, peaceful day. Take care. Hi, I'm Dottie, and I need more subscribers. They're not out there, Dottie.